On December the 31st, 2019, in Wuhan, the capital of Hubei province, in the People's Republic of China, cases of detected pneumonia are first reported to the World Health Organization. During this reported period, the virus is unknown. January 11th, 2020, the first death caused by the coronavirus is reported. A 61-year-old man exposed to the virus at a seafood market died on January 9th after respiratory failure caused by severe pneumonia. By the end of the first month of 2020, WHO determines that the virus outbreak constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
We don't know what sort of damage this virus could do if it were to spread in a country with a weaker health system. We must act now to help countries prepare for that possibility. For all of these reasons, I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
February 11, 2020, WHO names the coronavirus COVID-19, and thus began an unprecedented global pandemic that would devastate economies, stretch medical systems in almost every country, and cause the deaths of millions around the world. Weeks after the disease took its toll in Italy, it began in Nigeria. The first case of coronavirus disease in the country was an Italian citizen in Lagos who tested positive on February 27, 2020. The patient, who was Italian, worked in Nigeria and returned from Milan, Italy to Lagos on the 25th of February 2020. The government of Nigeria, through the Federal Ministry of Health, immediately began strengthening measures to ensure an outbreak in Nigeria was controlled and contained quickly. Nigeria has since recorded over 165,000 cases across its 36 states and federal capital. 156,000 patients have successfully recovered. However, sadly, over 2,000 have died from complications related to the virus. While the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 and the NCDC are at the front line of the struggle against the pandemic, President Muhammadu Buhari has activated other tools and procedures available to government in order to ensure that Nigeria fully controls and defeats the virus within its borders. The Tertiary Education Trust Fund was quickly drafted and deployed to this struggle by the President. TETFund, under the leadership of its Executive Secretary, Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro, responded with a threefold strategy targeting the short, medium, and long-term interventions in line with the national aspirations of combating the pandemic as outlined by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19.
In keeping with the established tradition that ivory towers are the bastion of intellectualism and the breeding ground for creativity, original thinking, and innovation that shape and define civilizations and also drive economies and development. It is in recognition of this that President Muhammadu Buhari has made quality education through science, technology, and innovation one of the pillars of the next level of the APC-led federal government. Precisely why Mr. President last year told the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, to instruct TETFund to support the federal government initiative of responding to COVID-19 threat through groundbreaking research for phytomedical drugs, prophylactics, PPE, and eventually vaccines. I am pleased to inform you that TETFund has gone far in implementing the President's directives. and soon the results will be announced.
The period of total lockdown, which extended to prohibition of interstate travel, was particularly difficult for Nigerians, many of whom made their living from daily trade activities. In support of the federal government of Nigeria, TETFund responded through the donation of palliative materials to cushion the sudden effect of the pandemic in different communities across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The world breathed a sigh of relief on December 10th, 2020, when vaccine advisors to the FDA in the United States voted to recommend the agency grant emergency use authorization to Pfizer coronavirus vaccines. Only days later, the FDA authorizes a second coronavirus vaccine made by Moderna for emergency use. For the first time since the pandemic began, hope seemed to be on the horizon. But even in the early days, as the most powerful and economically buoyant nations placed massive orders and prepared extensive distribution logistics, it became obvious that developing countries, including Nigeria, risked being left out in the cold due to the threat of vaccine nationalism. Vaccine nationalism occurs when governments sign agreements with pharmaceutical manufacturers to supply their own populations with vaccines ahead of those becoming available for other countries. A situation like this would be a big challenge to Nigeria's medicine security unless the country can use research and development to secure itself against this and any future pandemics.
Other countries are deliberating and discussing how to distribute vaccines to their people. And Americans are complaining that despite the fact that they have distributed over 20 million doses, it's still not enough, and it has been. The Europeans are threatening to stop the export of vaccines to other countries. Indians, I think, have banned the export of this country. The Chinese have been distributing vaccines for a long time, and indeed are promising to export vaccine to Africa. In Africa, we are waiting. And the difference why these people are talking about distribution and we are waiting to receive supplies is the fact that has been highlighted, that they have moved into a state in their countries where knowledge and science and technology and innovation drives the progress of society and drives development. And until and unless we move our country into that status, the future may be very bleak.
President Muhammadu Buhari approved the funding of 6 medical simulation, research, and training facilities in colleges of medicine, 1 per geopolitical zone in the country through TETFund. The facilities include the provision of molecular science laboratories with capacity for testing and diagnostics of COVID-19, Lassa fever, and other related viral diseases.
I'm happy to say that as I talk to you, we've approved 6 research grants, with 1 from University of Ibadan. Well, I think there is a second one, whether it's Ibadan, Unilag, and I think you do Sokoto also, and I think Oka, Unizik, I think they partnered. But we had one that was exclusively UI earlier, so that may be a second one. Then we have, of course, you do Sokoto, University of Jos, and Unizik, with the Vice Chancellor in Unizik personally leading that listing. Then we have that of NAFDAC, with the DG herself, Professor Mojishola Adeye, as the principal investigator of this particular therapeutic drug, research. And we are looking forward. I know there were one or two proposals that did not scale through for the purpose of initiating production of a ventilator. We just hope we will continue to improve on that. And I can tell you, I think with this thing we're spending over 200 million for supporting COVID research. And it may interest you. If you like, when you go out here, the first floor, you cross that new extension there, you go and see NCRC R&D Secretariat. TETFund is hosting it. And NCRC is National COVID-19 Research Consortium with NCDC, Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, of course the Federal Ministry of Health itself, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, TETFund, NUC, all of us in partnership. The Secretariat is here for COVID research. It may interest you to know.
TETFund leveraged Nigeria's public university system, R&D institutions, as well as other organizations to achieve this. The following institutions were funded by TETFund to undergo COVID-19 research works: the National Food and Drug Administration and Control, the University of Ibadan, Usman Danfodio University, the University of Jos, the Nnamdi Azikiwe University, and the Kaduna State Polytechnic. For the first time in Nigeria, inspired by the paradigm shift that institutionalizes research and development as priority, TETFund has acquired the latest world-class industrial-grade drug screening software under this intervention. This will go a long way to consolidate on the new R&D drive in our tertiary institutions, which has led to the emergence of the production of sanitizers, prototype ventilators, and PPE in our universities across the country.
I'd like to put on record that TETFund was actually one of those groups that were foresighted enough to begin to look in this direction even before the pandemic hit the shores of the country. Myself and a few other colleagues for close to a decade now had been preaching the mantra for us to start to develop local solutions to problems that come up in our settings, and that's why we came up with the concept of medicine security. So kudos to TETFund for being one of the forerunners in that particular arena to identify that there is an urgent and important need for Nigerian scientists to be in a position where we can contribute to addressing our own healthcare needs.
Drug security is defined as measures put in place to ensure that quality, safe, and effective medicines are produced by facilities that meet the right standards, and that the integrity of such medicines is not compromised during its distribution along supply chains. Interestingly, Nigeria is uniquely positioned to achieve drug security through phytomedicines and petrochemicals.
Just to give you a broad picture of the two major sources of pharmaceuticals and phytomedicine. So you have a significant proportion coming from the flora that exists in the country. Those are the phytomedicines. But you also have medicines of petrochemical origin. So medicines that can actually come from our petroleum industry. You know, petrochemicals are now transformed into active pharmaceutical ingredients, which now go into the production of drugs. So whether you're talking of medicines of phytomedicinal origin or medicines of petrochemical origin, Nigeria is blessed in both areas. And those two things have come up in our discussions in the pharmaceuticals group. There is an urgent and important need to develop our capacity in phytomedicinal medicine production. And there is an urgent and important need to develop our capacities, link up with the petroleum group to develop medicines and APIs, that's active pharmaceutical ingredients, from the petrochemical and petroleum sector. So we're looking at both scenarios at the same time. What are the advantages, you would say? One is that we are sure of achieving medicine security for our people. Medicine security is a concept that we came up with a few years ago, which argues that unless a people are able to guarantee the production and provision of high quality, safe and affordable medicines for its population, that country will not be able to ensure that that population has good access to healthcare. It's not rocket science, but we've been preaching it for years, and it took the COVID pandemic to open everybody's eyes that this is what we need to be doing right now.
Pharmaceutical, yes. This is very important. And at no time in recent years have we had the challenge of pharmaceutical. As with the issue of vaccines now, am I right? Drugs, for most of last year. We were praying that eventually some vaccines would be confirmed by the World Health Organization having been clinically certified to be applied to you and me. Most of the time we started with some, drugs, as it were, right. Some, as much as possible, and a lot of research work has been going on, especially photogenic drugs, as it were, and from natural plants. And we have a lot of, remember this country, Madagascar, also thing that they came, although that one fell flat, it didn't take long because of some obvious scientific opinion and facts confirmed even in laboratories that you had to. But you look at it, this country, tell me, which type of plants don't we have? From the forest there up to the Sudan, the savanna areas, and so on and so forth. And these plants have substances that can be extracted and characterized, and they solve the problems of diseases in a manner you never would have expected. And thank God, the Ministry of Health, I understand, is setting aside funds for research for both vaccines and drugs, as well as all curative and preventives. Anyway, so we are hoping we just go the right direction, and we are aware that there are a number of research institutes, medical and otherwise, veterinary, as well as NIPRIT, as we know, Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. They have been working in collaboration, NVRI, VOM, NIPRIT, Lagos, for the purpose of especially the phyto drugs, like I talked about.
It's obviously early days, so we can't say exactly how much the RDSC and the foundation that will come out has been able to contribute to COVID, the response to the COVID pandemic. But already the signs are there. Currently, the nation, as well as the rest of Africa, is suffering for a lack of capacity to develop vaccines and other relevant interventions. However, some of the key issues that have come up in the pharmaceuticals group, as well as in other cross-cutting groups that we have engaged with, have indicated that, number one, phytomedicines is an area where Nigeria has a comparative advantage and where we need to start building capacity. We need to start ramping up capabilities so that we can start harnessing those capabilities. You may be aware that the agency, which I head, recently developed a phytomedicine called Niprimune, which is based on the plant Andrographis paniculata. And we're pushing to go to clinical trials for COVID-19 for that particular drug. Our colleagues in Thailand, who incidentally have had better funding, already use that particular phytomedicine to manage COVID-19. And so that's the importance of what TETFund is doing today, bringing doctors, pharmacists, and all other professionals that can contribute to undertaking successful clinical trials, as well as providing a mechanism for ready and available funding for those clinical trials to be expedited.
Only 3 countries in Africa presently have capacities for vaccinology. However, Nigeria is not one of them. TETFund is therefore structuring a special intervention that will change these narratives.
COVID-19 pandemic has actually thrown a lot of challenges in almost every sector of our national life, most especially in the pharmaceuticals industries. But one thing assuring is that just recently we had a local state tours of some pharmaceutical industries across the country and some research institutes. And from what we have seen, it's like our pharmaceutical companies are already there. All they need is support from government. And in fact, one striking achievement that we have recorded is the one we saw in Ibadan, Forestry Research Institute. In fact, they have already manufactured something that can boost immunity. It has even been registered by NAFDAC. I don't want to call it a drug for COVID-19, but I think it's along that line. And then also they have something in place that has to do with the COVID-19 vaccine.
TETFund has selected National Veterinary Research Institute, VOM, Nigeria Medical Research Institute, Lagos, and the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development as priorities in this inescapable intervention at the critical period of our national history.
If all those things are in place, the next time we have a pandemic, we won't be looking to the West for responses.
It is imperative to place the present and the future of this emerging pandemic in its proper context. TETFund is committed to these special interventions for the soul of our nation. It is obvious that the developed world is closing its borders systemically and focusing on its own aspirations. Nigeria, however, has a golden opportunity to turn the story around. It can only do this with the explorative tool for harnessing indigenous knowledge. That tool is research and development, and that is the paradigm shift.